Peace and salam. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. This is your host Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Galaxy 19 satellite, which covers United States, Canada, and Mexico. And we are always there on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV. And you can go on our website, muslimnetwork.tv, on download our app. I had the honor of organizing a small exhibit in Chicago on Timbuktu manuscripts. And it was a long time ago, in cooperation with the International Museum of Islamic Culture in Jackson, Mississippi. And that's where I met Abdul Hadra as well, a couple of times. The center of Islamic civilization has always moved from one nation to the other nation. It has never been very static. You can find it at one time in Baghdad, within 100 years of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And there were all sort of scholars, Greek scholars, Persian scholars, Jewish scholars, Indian scholars. There was a wisdom house where all these things will be translated and discussed and debated and further elaborated upon. Things will be invented. Then the center of that Islamic civilization moved to Muslim Spain. And again, it were all sort of people, Christian, Jews, Muslims, and other communities. It has been to Central Africa, Istanbul, and Turkey, close to Europe. But not many people know at one time Timbuktu was the center of Islamic knowledge and civilization. And once in a while you hear about that, and then that conversation disappears. So 500-600 years ago, actually, there were more foreign students in Timbuktu than there are foreign students, say, in city of New York. That was the time when Europe was still dealing with the dark ages and liberating itself. And some of those manuscripts and its translation through Sicily and Italy helped and contributed in the enlightenment of Europe. But not many people know about it. And there is someone who actually went there and wrote a book about a person and this heritage, how it is being saved. And that is a New York Times best-selling author, Joshua Hammer. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Joshua.
Thank you, Malik. Nice to be here.
Joshua Hammer is an author of a New York Times bestseller. And the title is The Bad-Ass Librarian of Timbuktu. He is contributing editor to Smithsonian Magazine, among many other places. Wow, Bad-Ass Librarian. That title itself must have sold a lot of books.
I think it was a great idea. Not my idea. It was my editor's idea. And I was very leery about it at first because I felt it perhaps, cheapened the story a little bit. Or else sort of gave the impression that it was a little, more Hunter Thompson-esque than it actually is. But she convinced me that, if you're going to write about Timbuktu and, a fairly arcane story in Northern Africa, you need to sort of apply sort of marketing principles and the combination of badass and librarians, and then you don't usually think of librarians as badass, so that's an immediate attention grabber. Then you throw in Timbuktu, and you have sort of like these three elements that really grab attention. And she was absolutely right, because I am 100% sure that the book would not have had anywhere near the success that it had it just been called, the Book Smugglers of Timbuktu or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's extraordinary. Well, she did a great job for you then. Tell me, when was the last time you were in Timbuktu?
2014. It's been a while. I've moved on. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have been reading news, you will be happy to know just a week ago, the first flight landed in Timbuktu after
You
20.
know, yeah, my old fixer, who's actually mentioned in the book a couple of times, sent me a video of that. So I actually just learned that last week. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be some good news there.
Yeah.
Now tell us, I mean, a whole lot of people have no idea where in the world is Timbuktu.
Yeah, it's a lot of people think it's kind of way up in the northern. Well, it's in Mali, first of all, West Africa, one of the largest countries in Africa, largest and least populated because it's in that Sahel belt. It's very sparse vegetation, doesn't support a large population. A lot of people have the idea that it's way up in the northern corner of the country. In fact, it's sort of middle. It's the middle of the country. It's really the area where the more temperate, fertile parts of the country kind of give way to the Sahara. So it's the Sahel belt, It's about 5 or 6 miles north of the Niger River. The Niger River sort of bends right there. Actually, at one time it was right on the river, but the desertification over the centuries has made it more and more isolated. So it's actually quite fairly distant. But of course, its position on the river, where the river meets the desert, is one of the reasons that it became the wealthy center of Africa, center of the intellectual world, center of the commercial world that it became in the 15th century, because of that juxtaposition of desert caravans heading across Africa, and then river traffic heading, sort of following the river up to. There's a good shot of the road to Timbuktu. That's a journey that I took back in 2014, I believe, when you could not travel, when it was there were no flights at the time because of the instability. So that was the way you were forced to travel, by road, and it was not an easy journey, and it was a dangerous journey. There were still jihadis out in the desert there, and you definitely risked being kidnapped. That was always my great fear. I had to make that trip twice, actually. And that's the river right there. You had to cross that river to get to back there. These are just some various shots of the Niger River there, of Timbuktu and the environs.
So when I forgot, could you refresh my memory? The whole thing is started when Gaddafi regime was dismantled, right?
Yeah, that kind of, look, there'd been, it had can't really, if you want to come up with this sort of final catalyst for the jihadist takeover of the country, yes, you could say it took place in 2011 when Gaddafi fell and the armories of the country were opened up to anybody who basically had a vehicle to load weapons onto. But I mean, the roots of the instability, the roots of the crisis go back decades. You had a lot of different factors. You had the Algerian civil war in the 90s that created this kind of radicalization in that corner of the world. You had the Tuareg rebellion that had been going on and off for decades, really, since independence.
Okay. That was the last straw, I guess. So
yes, the opening of the armories is what allowed the jihadists to get their weapons and capture Timbuktu. Correct. Yeah.
So how you first heard about manuscripts?
So I first heard about this back in 2006 when I was I just left. I was a Newsweek magazine correspondent. I'd been at it for 15 years. And I'd been to Timbuktu actually back in the 90s, but I didn't know anything about the manuscripts back then. But then in 2006, I'd become a freelance writer, always looking around for ideas. And I just came across an article, possibly in the New York Times. I don't even remember at this point where I found it, but it mentioned this revival of the manuscripts of Timbuktu that a handful of librarians were going out and finding these manuscripts that had kind of been lost over the centuries and bringing them back to Timbuktu and opening libraries, restoring the manuscripts, and trying to restore Timbuktu to the glory of its years back in the 15th, 16th centuries when it was an academic center of Africa. And I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know that Timbuktu had a manuscript tradition, anything like that, but it caught my interest immediately. And then I think the article mentioned Abdul Haidara as the librarian who was taking the most active role in doing this manuscript restoration work. And so I can't remember the sequence of events, but possibly I got in touch with Abdul Qadir from home and made an arrangement to meet or talk to NGO or somebody. And I had a relationship with Smithsonian Magazine at the time, and they liked the idea. It's a natural story for that publication, which is always interested in archaeology and history, and has sort of a very international focus. So within a week, I was on a plane to Timbuktu. I was on a plane to Africa, and then headed up to Timbuktu. In those days, you could travel pretty freely up there. There were a lot of commercial flights. The city was really in a kind of golden age between the manuscript restoration that was going on. A lot of scholars and journalists were coming up to look at it, and then you had the festival, what they call the Festival in the Desert, which was this a cultural festival mostly about Malian music, which was attracting tourists from all around the world. So it was a brief period of real activity and cultural renaissance for the city. And I was fortunate enough to get up there in 2006, just at that time when things were really, really hopping. So as much as the things can be hopping in Timbuktu, I mean, it's still, hopping in Timbuktu is a relative term.
Yeah, I mean, probably, considering it's Black History Month, more Black children know about Mansa Musa, but probably they do not know much about Timbuktu and its literary heritage. I think that is one area. I came in touch. I met Abdul Qadir 2-3 times actually.
Did you? Wow.
And when I organized, there's a museum in Jackson, Mississippi. It's called Islamic Museum, International Museum of Islamic Cultures. So they had a whole year-long exhibit of Timbuktu manuscripts. I
think I mentioned that as Jackson is one of the places where Abdul Qadir took his roadshow. Yeah. I always thought it was an unusual place for him to go, to Jackson, Mississippi.
But, yes.
Yeah.
But thanks to African base in Jackson, Mississippi, they were able to invite him, and from there I brought some manuscript and we had a couple of day-long exhibit in Chicagoland area. A popular African-American host became its champion in announcing and publicizing. Not many people came, unfortunately. So tell us, now that Timbuktu seems to be free, where are the manuscripts?
Yeah, the manuscripts are still in Bamako, unless things have changed since the last time I checked. But I've been in regular contact with actually, his name is Columbus Stewart, and he is a monk, Benedictine monk in Minnesota, who has spent much of the last 2 or 3 decades traveling around the world restoring and digitizing manuscripts. He began specifically with Catholic works, and then moved on to, and this sort of became a multi-denominational work from Hindu works in Nepal to hooking up with Abdul Qadir in Bamako, and took on the manuscript project. So he has been traveling until the pandemic, he's been traveling on a regular basis to Mali, to Bamako, the capital, and digitizing these 300,000 or so manuscripts very systematically. To make sure that should anything happen to them again, since they came pretty close to being destroyed the last time around, that there is at least a digital record of them. So that project is ongoing. And I think until that's completed, there won't be any movement to send them back to Timbuktu. But of course, the place is still, despite the fact, as you point out, that the commercial flights have started again, which is a very good sign.
But Bamako itself, because of all this political upheaval and dismissal and military I don't know how things will be safe in Bamako either. So I think digitizing project in that sense is going to reserve a huge amount of world heritage until people are able to study them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that instability in Bamako, political instability is necessarily going to threaten the manuscripts. I mean, they really face an existential threat from the jihadists in Timbuktu. They don't have that, direct threat in Bamako. I think they're pretty safe hands. But obviously, Abdul Qadir will make that call when he decides that it's Timbuktu is safe, secure enough to return these fragile works, to the place that they really do belong.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Joshua Hammer, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here. In this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say. Salam! 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 Cut! Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon.
People consider this to be world's most precious manuscripts. What's the reason for that?
It's debatable. I mean, I don't know if you can. It certainly was a good subtitle for the book. I don't want to dismiss some of the great illuminated manuscripts of Europe, but there are some I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of these manuscripts, and there are some just beautiful. Well, there's beautiful calligraphy. There's beautiful designs, gold leaf, fantastic colors. The leather covers of the books are often beautiful as well. And then, of course, the subject matter is, I think, what is most surprising and alluring for a lot of people, in that they touched on a lot of themes ranging from, that gave you sort of a very vivid portrait of the cultural life of the Arab world at that time. A very open, certainly in that part of the world. A very open to scientific ideas, to discussing very sophisticated inquiries into astronomy, some beautiful poetry, medical treatises, philosophy, history of the region, very detailed historical accounts. Just a wide variety of music, essays about music, as well as the Quran and the Hadith. There's, of course, those were produced in vast numbers as well. And a beautiful variety of Qurans. I mean, some of them inscribed, written on parchment made of fish skin. Some really sort of surprising media. That is from the French. That photo is of the French when the French arrived to save the day and that's Bamako. So yes, there are lots of reasons that these manuscripts are valued, both for their content and for their physical appearance.
So what material these manuscripts are written? You mentioned fish skin.
Oh, that's rare. I mean, the standard. I mean, they imported a lot of paper from Italy. Italy was a major supplier of paper in those days, and it was all shipped to Libya, what is now Libya, to Tripoli, and then sent down by camel caravans across the desert to Bamako, which had as I was talking about.
Somehow Europe was connected.
Europe was very much connected. Europe was the major supplier of paper to the Arab world. And in fact, Venice produced this paper that had a watermark of a cross, and that did not go over well. So that particular watermark was eliminated, and I think they ended up with crescent moon watermarks instead. Yeah, I mean, Europe was a major supplier. Italy specifically, a handful of factories.
So we're talking 500-600-year-old manuscript, and at that time, Italy has paper manufacturing already.
Yeah, well, the technology began the paper manufacturing began in China, and it kind of moved west across Asia and Europe, and then really took root in Italy.
So what is the size of all these manuscripts? How many? 10,000? What is this number?
Yeah, I mean, the word manuscript, I mean, it ranges. I mean, Abdul would consider a manuscript to say like maybe a single folio page, a letter, a one-page letter is a manuscript. But on the other hand, there could also be 400 or 500 page. I've inspected some really massive tomes of 400 or 500 pages. There was he showed me this 16th century sort of who's who of Arab philosophers throughout the world that must have been 400 or 500 pages, big thick volume with every distinguished scholar listed and given a short biography. Then I mean, it's just a vast range of manuscript sizes. And these fish skin, as I said, the fish skin manuscript is, I only saw a small sample of that, but it's that big. I mean, it's incredible what was inscribed on something maybe an inch or 2 inches in diameter, and then you had these massive tomes. So great variety.
So would you say in total, all these libraries are counted together? There may be 100,000 manuscripts of different sizes or more?
Yeah, this is a number that's always been debated. I think there was a lot of, I had, Abdul always used the figure 350,000. Again, referring not just to, again, a single page fragment or a letter would be considered a manuscript. So that's a wide definition of manuscript. But, so he used the figure 350,000. Others have claimed that he was exaggerating. Columbus Stewart, that monk that I mentioned, who is digitizing the works, I think he put the number more at about 275.
Okay.
People have been attacking Abdul Qadir for wildly exaggerating the numbers. To me, the difference between 275 and 350 is not worth a big argument.
Yes, it's still a large volume of those things.
Yeah.
Until somebody sits down and classifies, will not know. Both may be estimating. But the monk Columbus, which you mentioned, how many of those 275,000 or whatever he says have been digitized so far?
Yeah, I think he's about he was, when we talked last summer, about 2/3 of the way through.
Wow.
It's a largely Malian staff, so it may very well be that even during this pandemic period, they've been able to continue the work. I don't know. I haven't been in touch with them in the last few months, so I'm not sure how that's progressing. But 2/3 easily by like last August.
Okay, so where all this digitization is being preserved?
Yeah. So, sorry, what was your question?
Where all this, the works which has been digitized already?
Yeah, the studio, there's a huge climate-controlled warehouse in sort of central Bamako, I guess. I'm not sure exactly where in Bamako it is, but everything's been consolidated there in a large warehouse, and everything's apparently in very good hands. So it's all very centralized now. When the manuscripts were originally brought out in 2014, they were 2013. Sorry, they were scattered all over the city in basements, and just in bad conditions. And they very quickly realized that there was a need to do a second rescue and create facilities where they would be kept preserved in this very different climate. Bamako is kind of a humid city, a lot of rain, very different from Timbuktu. One of the reasons the manuscripts survived so long without serious damage was because of that climate up in Timbuktu, very arid climate in Timbuktu. So faced very different conditions in Bamako, and they had to quickly come up with a way of saving them.
So it is not online. It is just digitized in hard drives and kept in that location.
Yeah, but the idea is to present them make them available to the public. There's a huge digitized manuscript library at this university, St. John's University in Minnesota, where Columbus Stewart is a professor. And I think they are going to be responsible for the whole for bringing everything online and classifying, categorizing, possibly even translating a bit. I'm not sure where things stand on that. How much you can actually get right now, how much you can see, I don't know.
So translating, so most of this, probably almost all of it is in Arabic script, but it has different African languages written there, right?
Yeah, I think Arabic is the language, is the mode of writing, but there are lots of different. There are also, I understand, Tamashek manuscripts, the language of the Tuaregs. Actually, are quite literate popular ethnic group, and they had their own very ancient alphabet. So they produced a bunch of manuscripts that are part of that collection. There are a lot of local languages in Mali, but everything's been transliterated into Arabic, as I understand it. Yeah.
So, Malian government, what is their role in this preservation? Is somehow UNESCO involved in this?
I've not heard about UNESCO. UNESCO was certainly involved early on, back in 2012, 2013, in sort of bringing attention to the fact that the manuscripts were in jeopardy. But I haven't even heard any mention of, when talking to Columba, never heard him mention UNESCO at all. I don't know where they stand in this whole thing. They seem to be taking a back seat in everything. This is
What about the Mali government?
haven't heard anything from the Mali government except that I believe they've given their blessing to, Columba has never had a problem getting in and out of Mali, and but I don't believe that they're participating in this project in any way. This is really just a venture between St. John's University, which has a certain amount of benefactors and donors, and at Abdul Qadir, and there are numerous NGOs both in the Arab world, Dubai, for instance, and Europe that I think are helping to underwrite the project, which is pretty expensive. Requires a lot of man hours, a lot of money.
Yeah, preservation is not an easy thing. Museum normally work on a very slow pace.
This is a handful of guys,
itself is not a bulldozer job.
5-6 people in a studio, processing these books, just one page after another. Takes a long time, and involves, like I said, a lot of man hours.
Have you written any update on this particular aspect of it, preservation?
I actually wrote a profile of Columba for Smithsonian Magazine. That's when I got in serious contact with him last summer, but it hasn't run yet. I don't know what's happening to it. It'll run one of these days.
So African literary heritage, this is one collection. Where else in Africa you can find manuscripts who are, say, historical nature or written 500-600 years ago?
Well, I think there are some in Mauritania, as I understand it, and Nigeria, some in Tripoli. There was a big incident back in 2011, 2012, when one of the great libraries of Tripoli, or of Libya, I'm not sure it was in Tripoli, was destroyed by jihadis. And that was one of the incidents that really persuaded Abdul Qadir and his librarians to move the manuscripts out of Timbuktu and get them to Bamako. I don't know what the fate of those manuscripts was, if there were like a great collection in Libya or not. I believe so. No, really everything. Mali was the center. Timbuktu was really the center of the North African intellectual world back then, academic world. So everything was concentrated there. And it's amazing that one city really was kind of the gathering place for all of this material over centuries. And then, of course, it was all dispersed and then was all recollected again. That's really one of the parts of the story that we haven't talked about, is Abdul Qadir's incredible efforts in the 1980s to bring all the manuscripts back from the villages that they've been scattered to around Mali, and get them all in libraries in Timbuktu, which was sort of helped to revitalize Timbuktu and led to the cultural renaissance, but also left them very much in danger when the jihadis took over the city in 2012.
Well, that's where I wanted to go, and you started talking about it. So let's take a short break. This is Muslim Network TV, and Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid talking with Joshua Hammer, who has written a bestseller in New York Times a while ago, and we're discussing the manuscripts of Mali. We'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, who she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way. And because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Welcome back to Muslim Network. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Joshua Hammer about Timbuktu Manuscripts. Your book is about the heroic efforts by Abdul Haidara in Timbuktu to collect manuscripts, preserve them, and that's how I met when he brought his exhibit to Jackson, Mississippi. So tell me about what motivated him to just remain focused on those manuscripts.
Well, he came from an academic family. I mean, his father was, I think, there had been manuscript collecting in the family for many generations. Small numbers, a small collection grew over the centuries. And then his father was really kind of seriously pursued manuscript collecting as he traveled around Africa as a young man. He came back and became the Qadi of his small village, 100 or so miles from Timbuktu. Moved to Timbuktu, became a scholar and a teacher there. So had these manuscripts that Abdul Qadir was entranced by. He would haul out these ancient manuscripts for his students in the madrasa that he ran, in the house, in the foyer of the house. And Abdul Qadir, from an early age, was introduced to these books. But he never really imagined that he would spend his life immersed in this, do it as a profession. He was interested, as he said, in kind of buying up real estate and becoming perhaps a trader. He made the acquaintance of the head of the government library in Timbuktu in the early 1980s, at the time when this visionary librarian had the idea of bringing back the manuscripts that had been dispersed around the country over the centuries. And he enlisted a very reluctant Abdul Qadir to help him track them down. So Abdul Qadir, deferred his plans to go into business, and then he began traveling by boat along the Niger River and by camel caravan through the desert, up to some of the remote salt, the old salt mining route up to the heart of the deep into the Sahara. And pretty quickly through he became more and more sophisticated about what he was looking for and how much money he should offer. They were being bankrolled by Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, so he had some money to spend. And he was a very persuasive talker, as you know. I mean, he's a kind of a charismatic, energetic individual. People were very suspicious at first. They didn't want to part with their manuscripts. They were family heirlooms. They didn't want to just turn them over to a stranger to be whisked off to Timbuktu, which many of them had never, even visited. But Abdul Qadir was very persuasive and charming, and offered money and offered cattle and offered to build mosques and build schools, and very successfully amassed this big collection of manuscripts in the course of a decade, brought them all back to Timbuktu, and then was able to raise funds from foreign donors and get grants and build libraries. And then others in Timbuktu who kind of viewed him as a mentor did the same thing, and they had their family collections, and they began aggressively trying to reach out to their family members dispersed around Mali and bring those manuscripts back and open their own libraries. And as I said in the book, by like the year 2000, there were a couple of dozen of these real serious libraries with these manuscripts in them. Abdul Qadir's and the government library were still the biggest and best. But there were, I think at the time of the jihadi invasion, there were something like, I don't know, I can't remember the figure I used, 70 or 80 libraries. Now these range between, these Abdul Qadir's beautiful 5 or 6 room, 2-story, sunlit, climate controlled complex with display rooms and glass cases preserving these amazing manuscripts to a single room in somebody's house that they declare to be a library. But there was no question that it was this cultural renaissance going on in the city that attracted a lot of people from, as I said, all over the world to come look at what was going on. Me being one of them.
Enjoyed hearing that he exchanged cattle for books.
He did, and sheep, and goats, and chickens. I think, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, Abdul Qadir Haider, whenever you met, you're impressed. I mean, of course, he's a tall, well-built guy. Yeah, my Arabic is not strong enough to communicate with him, but I was able to understand because I don't have any idea about French at all. So
that's how I spoke to him. Yeah.
You spoke in French with him?
Yes.
Okay, so that's so you had better communication than I did.
It really
he was so enthusiastic and willing to talk and discuss. So when these attackers came, jihad is a very positive Muslim concept. So we hate to attribute to some thugs and criminals the jihadists, but I know this is the dominant discourse in the Western media. So when those thugs and criminals came attacking, he immediately started moving things, or some were lost before he started moving things?
I'm not sure it was immediate, but he definitely within a week or so realized that these potentially could be, when he saw sort of all the looting going on in the city, not by the jihadists, but more by the Tuaregs, who were kind of this undisciplined force that were working hand in hand with the jihadists. He got worried. And so at that point, really fearing, not so much fearing, an ideological attack, but more feeling just lawlessness and looting, he began to concoct this plan to move the manuscripts out of these libraries where they would be easily picked off, and to secrete them in people's houses. So that plan began, a week or two after the takeover of the city. By these, as I said, by these joint forces of Tuaregs and jihadists. Pretty soon the jihadists gained the upper hand, and then it became sort of a different dynamic where he was really afraid that the jihadis might, directly threaten the manuscripts because of their content, or hold them hostage, or destroy them out of spite, because, lots of reasons why he feared the jihadists getting their hands on these treasures.
So other than Abdul Qadir, there were others who have that heritage, and they were willing to work with Abdul Qadir to transfer those to the safer places?
he enlisted the support of a couple of hundred people, a network of about a couple of hundred people, including a lot of, I mean, the last phase of the, first the phase one was to move them out of the libraries and move them into people's houses, hide them in storage rooms and obscure back alleys in the city. Stage two was a little bit further down the line, was to actually get them out of jihadist territory and move them down into Bamako. And that was a more elaborate procedure that involved enlisting, dozens of young men, mostly drivers, packers, to pack these books into cars and then sort of bring them down across the desert into Bamako, passing jihadist checkpoints and that sort of thing.
So, and you mentioned somewhere there are about a certain number of intellectual families where this heritage has stayed more or less together.
There were, I think the number I used, it's been a while, was like 12 major families of Timbuktu. And pretty much every one of these families had a book collection and a manuscript collection. And every one of those manuscript collections ended up being in a library because they all got their hands on grant money, Ford Foundation money, Dubai money, money from Luxembourg, Prince of Luxembourg, whatever, German funds. So they were all able to create these manuscripts. Manuscript libraries, collections, and then they fear being targeted. So they were all involved in this scheme with Abdul Qadir. He was working mostly, he was the man in charge, but they were all they all entrusted their collections to him and his team. So
what is the population of Timbuktu?
50, 60,000, I think.
Oh, so you say it's no longer the historic big city. It's just
that's right. Yeah, in those days, at the highlight, I mean, at the sort of the apogee of its university days, it had, I think, 100,000 scholars from all over the Arab world. So they actually outnumbered the population back then. Yeah.
Who calculated this thing? It is said that there were more than, now you're saying 100,000 students, but I heard about 30,000 students. Who comes up?
I think there are various accounts. There are histories written about this period. Very few of them have been translated. They're just excerpts translated into English. But I'm imagining that 100,000 figure comes from one of the great histories of Timbuktu and the surrounding regions that was written in the 16th century, 17th century. Yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about is the script. The Arabic script which they are using is not the script which was used in, say, Cairo or Baghdad or in these places. They're using the Arabic script, which became, although was born in Iraq, but was used essentially in Spain, Muslim Spain or Andalusia.
Interesting.
Connection with this Muslim Spain and Timbuktu?
Totally connection with Muslim Spain. I mean, they have traced books. Some of the Qurans in the collections of Abdul Qadir and others came from Moorish Spain, made their way down by camel caravan. I guess after the expulsion of the Moors, right, 1492. I think, and maybe even earlier, you had this mass migration of Muslims from Spain into Timbuktu. A lot of them brought their books, their manuscripts with them. So a total, a total connection between the two.
It must be, because maybe, when the treaty was formed and the final Muslim were thrown out, book in Granada was burned in a square. So it is possible that some of these scholars have this Abdul Qadir type of job to carry some of the book over there, because I was very curious. I said, why these things are in Kufi script? But that's the script of the
Kufi script. Yeah, I didn't know. There you learn something new every day. I did not realize that it originated in the Spanish Peninsula. But there you go.
No, it was that the way they will write
Okay, there's
was
similarity.
there. Its origin name Kufa. Kufa is a city in Iraq. At
Right.
one time, it was a
Yes,
literary center.
in southern Iraq near Najaf.
But it became the dominant Arabic script of Muslim Spain. I mean, another thing which was very intrigued. I mean, I'm just so intrigued, not just by your title of your book. I really want to go there and look at these things. So one of the things which I read in some article, I don't know whether you covered this in your book or not, but in some article in New York Times, I think it was a review of your book.
Mm-hmm.
It refers to there were Jewish quarters there. That's another connection with Spain. I mean, in Spain, when I was visiting the Jewish Heritage Museum in Istanbul, they connect their heritage coming from when Inquisition took place in Spain against Muslim and Jews by these Catholics. When they ran away, a good part of them came to Istanbul. So in that museum, they have that history preserved there. I wonder if some of those Jewish scholars, instead of coming to Istanbul, went to Timbuktu.
Because I don't know if there's a Spanish movement to Timbuktu. There definitely were, Jewish merchants, traders living up there, but they were in Gao, which is an even bigger city on the Niger River, and they faced some real problems. I mean, there was definitely a big wave of anti-Semitism. That you ended up having a whole bunch of, you ended up having them, I think, expelled from Timbuktu. Some of them were jailed. There was a temple burned. This was back in the 16th century. I'm not really sure what happened to that population, but they were never really safe up there.
This is also a history I wish somebody will write, because at one time you have this Maimonides. Muslims know him as Musa bin Maimun. I mean, that's the Islamic name. And until I came to America, I didn't know Musa bin Maimun actually is a Jewish. He's so mentioned in Islamic scholarship. There is a Jamia Qarawiniya, which is one of the oldest university in Morocco. And he was a teacher. You go in the mosque of Jamia Qarawiniya or Qarawiniya University, there is a place where he used to sit and and teach people. He was a teacher of Muslim and Islamic madrasa. I mean, they say, so in Spain, there's a history, there is a Timbuktu history, so many places. And in Baghdad, when we read the history, Jews are around. So I think the Jewish-Muslim common heritage of scholarship is one of the topic maybe you want to start working on.
Perhaps. There are definitely a few Hebrew manuscripts I don't know if they're in Abdul Qadir's collection, but there's some of them in the Bamako collections. There are a handful of Hebrew manuscripts.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't seen any personally, so I have been told.
Yeah. And I wonder if that there may be other Hebrew scripts, but I think those I hope somebody will study them and they become part of that. So what are the other scholarly ventures you have? I know you have the good marketing agent who can come up with the clever names.
You mean regarding my book, my Bad-Ass Librarians, or my other, or more?
Yeah, the Bad-Ass Librarian of Timbuktu, the person who came up with that.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work universally. That is not a term that, for some reason, in Great Britain, that term is really ridiculed and disliked. And
many of the review of your book, people make an exception to the title.
Brits in particular, it's more of an American colloquialism than it is and Canadian, I guess, as well, but not in Great Britain.
Also, they don't take the type of meaning we take it here?
Sorry, what?
So British don't
use it. They just never use that term. They view it as a kind of vulgar Americanism. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, British.
I don't care about that British audience anyway.
So what are you writing now?
I'm looking for another book project actually, but one of the ways that I get to book projects is by, during these sort of fallow periods, is by doing magazine stuff that interests me. And I'm working on an interesting story right now. I don't want to reveal too much of it. It involves a kind of bizarre little dispute in the academic world, involve an archaeological world in between Great Britain and Turkey, or sort of involves the rising nationalism of Turkey, Western archaeologists. I'm not sure it's a book, but I'm working on a Smithsonian Magazine article, and I'm sort of intrigued by the subject, and considering as I begin to write it whether or not it's worth expanding. It doesn't necessarily have the same sort of drama of the last two books that I've written, so we'll see. It's a possibility. I like, I like subjects that allow you to kind of go explore a lot of different directions, explore a lot of different themes, I should say, and go in a lot of different directions is what I mean. I mean, the Bad-Ass Librarians enabled me to, was both sort of it was a thriller. It was a book about, Islamic culture in the 15th century. It was a bit of history. It was about the rise of jihadism in Northern Africa for the Algerian Civil War, the Arab Spring. So, you had this sort of narrative that you could hook a lot of different themes into and explore a lot of different worlds. So that's what really, that kind of a tale, I love reading those stories, and I like writing those stories. My last book was called The Falcon Thief, and that was about a very peculiar criminal who stole the live eggs of rare falcons, peregrine falcons and others, from their eyries, and sold them to wealthy sheikhs in Dubai and the Arab Emirates and Kuwait and other places for their falconry obsession. He was a Rhodesian, and that story, you had sort of, it's the story of this criminal, but it allowed me to get into the sort of the culture of falconry, the Arab world, how the oil money changed the culture, wildlife legislation in Great Britain, the obsession with eggs among a certain subculture of people in the UK and elsewhere. So I love these kind of weird journeys. I also followed this guy all around the world because he traveled from Quebec to Chile to Dubai to Zimbabwe, all in pursuit of these falcon eggs. So I kind of followed his trail. So there was, in a way, it was, the kind of adventure.
It's your type of egg hunter.
Kind of, yeah, yes. So I look for those kind of tales. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua Hammer, for your time. I appreciate that.
Okay, appreciate being on.
Take care of yourself. Joshua Hammer is an author of the New York Times bestseller, The Bad-Ass Librarian of Timbuktu. And thank you so much for Sherdil Khan for producing today's show, and Dr. Abdul Wahid. And thank you for watching. You're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and all other places. Stay tuned. Peace. Salam.
Salam.